Hi there, my name is Bernadette and I am part of the Base Design Systems team. Today we're going to talk about accessibility annotations. This screencast will cover when to best think about accessibility and the concept of shift left. We'll also look into what are accessibility annotations and why it's important, and we'll go over the types of accessibility annotations to have in design files, and then dive into how you can use the Base plugin to add these type of annotations in Figma. Before we dive in, when do you start thinking about accessibility? And what are the type of accessibility assessments do you consider for? Do you think about accessibility during the research phase, or when you're exploring design iterations, or when things are more finalized and ready to hand off to engineer? So when is the best time to think about accessibility? Many companies, not just Uber, it's easy to push aside accessibility later on in our process. A traditional quality process, testing for accessibility is most of the time done later when we've already implemented and built a feature. Sometimes accessibility is not even at all considered for. Have you heard of the term shift left? Shift left is a practice of moving testing quality assurance early in the process, often before any code is done. The benefits of applying shift left, it helps teams anticipate the changes that arise during the development process. Testing for accessibility at the end can be very costly and time-consuming to fix. But applying shift left, we can capture and address areas that can be improved in a less costly manner. In fact, it can cost Uber 5 times to 30 times the cost fixing accessibility issues after design. The cost of reworking can amplify time and money spent if not addressed early. DQ Systems, a digital accessibility company, did a study in 2021 which shows that 67% of accessibility defects originate in design. While it's our responsibility as product designers to design the visual experience of our products, that's simply not enough at all. Only considering the visual experience doesn't guarantee a good user experience for all of our users. We need to ensure that we're also considering and documenting for the non-visual experience of our products for assistive technology users. So what are ways we can document the non-visual experience of our products? Well, this is how accessibility annotations come into play. Accessibility annotations, are also known as blue lines, are accessibility-related specifications that help communicate important element properties and behaviors of a screen. This is an example of what an accessibility annotations look like that annotates for focus order, groupings, and accessibility features. And this is what we'll be going over today. Why should we have accessibility annotations? The benefits are not just considering people who are visual and non-visual users, but also considering the experience of people with different types of disabilities. The accessibility attributes and concepts that we'll go over are also used by other assistive technologies like voice control, switch controllers that are used by people who have mobility issues. Making Uber applications 100% accessible to voice-over and talkback users will likely make it usable for other types of assistive technologies and make our product more inclusive. Another benefit of providing accessibility annotations is that we're also considering for those critical behaviors and content. When we include accessibility annotations in our design files, we ensure that it's documented and not lost during handoff. So what should you annotate first? There's plenty of accessibility annotations you can start off with. Any of these are great to include as part of your design annotations, but it can get really overwhelming. So here's what we'll cover. This screencast will solely focus on a beginner level of how to document the screen reader experience of iOS and Android native applications. This screencast is divided into 2 parts. Today's part 1 is learning about what is a focus order. Then we'll go over into groupings and headings. And then for part 2, we'll cover accessibility attributes and alternative text. So as a brief refresher, what is a screen reader? A screen reader is an assistive technology primarily used by people with visual disabilities. Screen reader converts text, buttons, images, and other screen elements into speech or braille. The most common screen reader for mobile on iOS is VoiceOver, and on Android, it's called TalkBack. For web, there's JAWS, NVDA on Windows, and VoiceOver for Mac. If you're unfamiliar with how to use VoiceOver on a mobile device, our team has created a screencast in the past that walks you through on how to use VoiceOver. I strongly recommend watching this video first before continuing forward. This video will primarily focus on understanding the types of accessibility annotations and best practices. As we're designing for the visual experience of our products, it's important to always keep the screen reader experience in mind. Is the screen reader experience comparable to the visual experience? The following principles that we'll be diving into are approaches that you can apply early and often to stress test your designs. So as the first thing you may be already doing is starting off using base components to design flows and features with. The benefits of using base components is that most of the accessibility work has already been done for you. Dark mode, text resizing, color contrast, and accessibility attributes are built in or have been considered for in code. Using base components also ensure that our experiences appear and operate in predictable ways. But wait a minute. If the accessibility work has already been done, then why do you need to create accessibility annotations for your designs? That's a great question. In theory, if your designs use all base components, it wouldn't need annotations, except in the cases where a designer may want to override the default behavior of a screen reader. However, there are a few things that make it important for designers to include these accessibility annotations for all components and not just for custom ones. One of the reasons is testing. When an engineer is testing for a component, if the design they're going off has clear accessibility annotations, it'll make it much easier for them to make sure that everything is working as expected rather than assuming that things are working properly. After using base components, you then want to think about focus order of the elements on the screen. Focus order is the path a screen reader like VoiceOver and TalkBack take to sequentially navigate the elements on a screen. The focus order of a screen is defined pragmatically in code by default. So a best practice is to avoid changing the determined order the system has defined, and by doing so, it preserves the meaning of the content on the screen. When you QA your designs, you want to make sure that focus does not move in a random order that can cause disorientation to screen reader users. Another best practice is to follow a logical order of top to bottom, left to right, that matches the visual order of the content of a screen. Think of a Z reading pattern where readers will start with top left, then move to the top right, then diagonally to the bottom left, then finish off to the bottom right. When the order is not correct, navigating through a screen can be really cumbersome for a screen reader user. So focus should ideally align with the reading order in most cases. Another best practice is to define where focus should move to after a user interaction. In general, there's no need to define how focus changes after navigating to a new screen, since the operating system already handled this by default. Instead, the cases where changing the focus makes sense after an interaction is related to layout changes, dynamic content, or keeping the user's scroll position when navigating back. Let's watch a quick video of a user modifying their cart by increasing the quantity of an item.
Close button. Create group order button. Card. Taqueria Los Pericos button. Large special quesadilla. Meat choice, carne asada / steak. Remove item button. 1. Increase by 1 unit button. Price $15.45. Taco. Meat choice, carne asada / steak. Remove item button. 1. Increase by 1 unit button. Price $4.66. Taco. Meat choice, al pastor / barbecue pork. Remove item button. 1. Increase by 1 unit button. Increase item updated in cart. Close button. Create group order button.
As seen in the video, after the user double taps on the plus icon to increase the number of tacos to their order, the focus then jumps back to the top of the screen where the user would have to navigate back to the item and check to see if the item quantity has been updated. In this case, it would have been a better experience to have focus be on the item that the user just added to and call out the new updated quantity to be more efficient. So we've talked about best practices for focus order, but what are the consequences when focus is not defined meaningfully? Let's watch a quick example of a user wanting to learn more on how to reserve a ride in the Uber app.
Info button. Reserve. Cancellation policy and terms. Back button. Choose your exact pickup time. Extra wait time included to meet your cancel at no charge up to 60 minutes and done button. Report a bug button. Report a bug button.
In the video, when the user was in the reserve information screen, there was a moment when Focus voiced out the heading reserve. Then it jumped below the page to the cancellation policy and terms link. Then Focus jumps back to the top of the screen on the back arrow, then down to the first list item. It's important to remember that care should be taken so that Focus makes sense to both visual and non-visual users, and that content doesn't appear to jump randomly around the screen. If Focus do jump randomly, it can cause confusion on how content is arranged and make it difficult to understand. So if we were to go back and fix the screen, what should be the ideal focus order? Focus order should follow the same manner on how you would visually read the screen, top to bottom. So now that we've covered focus order, let's talk about groups. Groups is an important factor of focus order. The concept of groups is arranging elements together for a screen reader to simultaneously read out loud instead of reading individual elements one at a time. Grouping elements together can save users time by reducing the amount of swipe through a screen reader user has to go through. A best practice is to group elements that perform the same action or link to the same destination and are related to each other, like a card, tile, or input fields. Here's an example of a tile component that shows quick actions to get a ride and order food. Without grouping the elements of the tiles together, the screen reader will instead focus and read each element individually. This is not a great experience for screen readers because 1, it's inefficient to have to swipe 4 times to get through these 2 tiles. Secondly, screen reader will read the content in a Z pattern as get a ride, order food, right arrow button, right arrow button. This makes content confusing to interpret. What we want to do instead is group these 2 tiles as their own groupings. This will then create a better experience because it will 1, save screen reader users time to only have to swipe through twice to get to content, and the button element in each tile will be appropriately associated with its corresponding labels, making content clearer to understand. Grouping elements together provide efficiency to go through content of a screen. It can reduce the number of redundant focus targets and swipe throughs. As seen in this example, a screen reader user will be required to swipe through the content 18 times, whereas if we use the right groupings, we can reduce the amount of swipe throughs by half. Now let's watch a quick example of what happens when elements are not grouped together.
Manage membership button. End membership button. Close. Why do you want to end your membership? We'll use this to improve Uber One. Not satisfied with Uber One benefits. Is not selected button. Issues with my rides or orders. Is not selected button. Not saving enough. Is not selected button. Fees are too high on my rides or orders. Is not selected button. Want to take a break. Is not selected button. Something else. Is not selected button. Is selected. 0/1200. Text field. Double tap to edit. Use the rotor to access misspelled words. Continue.
In the video, Focus individually called out each element of the list item, the label, and the radio button. The user had to swipe through multiple times to get through the bottom of the list, which was inefficient. The radio buttons associated to the labels could have been grouped together to reduce the amount of redundancy. So what elements should have been grouped together? I would group the close button, the heading, the supporting text, and then have all the list items be grouped as their own, and the 2 buttons on the bottom will also be their own grouping. Now that you have an understanding of what a focus order and groups are, let's go over how you can add these specifications to your Figma using the Base plugin. In the Accessibility tab of the plugin, we have an annotation feature that can easily add focus order and group specifications to your designs. When you open this feature, there's a brief summary up top to what focus order and groups are. Below is a step-by-step guide on what to do and check for. So as a first step, I have this wallet balance history screen that I want to create annotations for. So what I'm going to do is select a screen. Then I have the option to either auto-annotate or manually annotate. A tip here is that if you use base components for your designs, the auto-annotate feature should work pretty smoothly. So in this case, let's give it a try. All right, as the next step, what we want to do is review the type of annotations that the plugin has generated. This part is really important. Be sure to check that focus order and groupings are correct, intentional, and clear. You can also refer back to the best practices that we went over in case you forgot. So, while reviewing this screen, it seems that the filter button was missed. And I want to have Screen Reader focus on this button after calling out the heading transaction. What I'm going to do is select this element and then hit Manually Annotate. The plugin then adds a focus and grouping annotation to this filter element. Now I just need to make sure to update all of these numbers. So let me do that quickly. All right, I think this looks pretty good. Now that we've annotated focus order and groupings, let's go over headings. Headings are like a skeleton or an outline of a document that enables users to have an overview of a screen's content and organization. Think of headings like a table of contents. Headings can play an important role in how screen reader users navigate a screen. People who are blind or low-visioned use headings to jump from section to sections to scan and navigate through content quickly. This significantly speeds interaction for screen reader users. Users can customize how screen reader reads and move through the content by going into the accessibility reading controls. On iOS devices, this can be done by accessing the VoiceOver rotor by rotating 2 fingers to navigate content with headings, containers, characters, and paragraphs. Whereas Android users, they can access TalkBack menu by using 3 fingers, swiping left or right to customize the reading controls. The best practice when designing is making sure that screens have page titles, so a screen reader user understands what screen they're in. And when there's a long list of items, be sure to use a section header to organize content. Headings should be short and concise that clearly describe the content. Aim for a 6th to 8th grade reading level and avoid complex words, and make sure to spell out acronyms. Let's watch an example of what happens when headings are not defined.
Restaurants, button, restaurants. Report a bug, button. Characters. Words. Speaking rate, 60. Containers. Headings. Heading not found. Heading not found. Restaurants. Heading not found.
In the video, Screen Reader is unable to detect any headings on the screen, but that's actually not the case because restaurants and today's offer are headings. So what can we do better to fix this screen? I would start off by annotating restaurants and today's offers as headings. So now that we've learned what headings are, let's do a quick demo on how you can use the base plugin to quickly add heading annotations in Figma. So in the Accessibility tab of the base plugin, you can find the Headings Annotations feature underneath Focus and Groups. In this feature, you'll find a quick summary of what headings are and a step-by-step guide on what to look for and do when annotating for headings. So as the first step, it's asking me to select a screen. I'm going to go ahead and select the settings screen that I'm working on. And then the feature gives me the option to auto-annotate and manually annotate this screen. And similar to when we were annotating for focus, order, and groups, auto-annotate works well when using all base components. So let's give this a try. All right, this looks really good. We got settings as a heading, favorites, family, and words. This looks great. So be sure to try this out in the base plugin that's available today. All right, that's part 1 of accessibility annotations. Let's do a quick recap of what we went over today. We went over the concept of shift left, of applying and testing for accessibility early in our process. We also went over accessibility annotations and its importance. We learned about focus order, groups, and headings. I hope you take any of these approaches that we went over and try it out today. You can start small by figuring out the focus order and then build your way up into identifying groups and headings. Be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of accessibility annotations, where we will go in depth and learn about accessibility attributes and text alternatives. So see you all in the next one.